Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Managing Violence podcast. Great to have you back with us again today. I'm joined today by Ron Amram, a repeat guest on the show, good friend of mine, a work buddy, and also a hell of a martial artist and a business owner. We're going to be talking about a slightly different topic, but something that I think is really important to broach, especially when it comes to being an instructor, running a business, what that means in terms of our ethics. I mean, are we being true to our self-defense or our warrior ethics, our martial arts ethics, the way we do business? We're going to unpack a bunch of that kind of stuff. But also remember, before we get into this conversation, that if you are a member of the Managing Violence tribe on Patreon, that's patreon.com/managing violence, you get bonus content, not only from this episode with Ron, but also pretty much all the episodes going back to season 4. So there's a ton of bonus content readily available there for as little as $5 a month. So make sure you check that out. Also, if you want to support the show, you can head to violencepod.com. There's a bunch of other options there. There's merch available. There's books available. There's a reading list. You can just send me some money for a coffee if you want. That's all totally appreciated. But without further ado, let us get straight to the man himself, Mr. Ron Amram. Ron, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, Joe. Great to be here again. It's been ages since we've chatted about this stuff because we talk every day. But
yeah. So for a peek behind the curtain, Ron and I work for the same company. I manage Victoria and Tasmania in the southeast of Australia. Ron manages pretty much everything we do on the west coast of Australia. So we are on opposite sides of the country, but we end up talking nearly every day, usually about business, about risk management, about clients. But secretly, we're both martial arts geeks and love talking about that stuff as well. For those of you that want to know more about Ron's story, go way back to like season 2, I think. Ron first appeared on the show. Season 1, maybe? It was right at the beginning. It was right at the beginning. And it was an incredibly noisy show because I tried to record from my garage. And we were live in person, and there was an ice cream truck. It's shenanigans. All right. It's an entertaining show, if for no other reason than the shenanigans. And then Ron came back and we did a bonus episode about training during lockdowns, which was kind of cool. So this topic today, Ron, you mentioned it to me and I thought it was a brilliant idea. It's looking at the ethics of how we market ourselves and how we attract students when it comes to the self-defense industry. So look, this is a big topic. It's something that you and I have both run professional schools. We've both been in the business of martial arts trying to attract students. And we've both seen it done really well, and we've both seen it done really badly, and we've seen it done badly and succeed. So there's interesting threads to pull up on there. But firstly, I've just spoken for 2 minutes before even giving you a chance to say hello. But why did this topic come up for you? Like, what was it that brought it up in your mind?
So, well, it actually came up during a work meeting that we had virtually a few weeks ago. Where we were talking about some of the programs that we run at Risk to Solution. And we were talking about a particular reading list about Robert Cialdini's work. For those of you who listen to the episode, don't know who Robert Cialdini is. He's, I guess, the godfather of influence. He's written some really amazing books about how salespeople, and I guess everybody, influence the decisions other people make and how they can essentially frame and prime people to make certain decisions. And, one of the things that we often talk about is how the bad guys do it, right? And that for some reason on that particular day, something just clicked with me with Cialdini's work, with some of the stuff that Gavin de Becker talks about in The Gift of Fear.
Absolutely.
Well, all of a sudden I just hold on a second. I've actually seen this exact phrase used in 2 different contexts, one by somebody trying to hurt somebody and the other one by somebody trying to get somebody to buy self-defense classes. And I just thought it'd be interesting to explore that because, as much as I hate saying, the industry is wrought with people who may not necessarily be doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. Whether on purpose or not, just because of ignorance. But we do see a lot of it come through. And for me, as an academy owner and somebody who believes in, giving people the tools they need to keep themselves and their families and loved ones and communities safe, there's so much stuff going around about how we get people into class and not all of it is always done the right way. So I think giving people the tools to understand what are the mechanisms that people who are marketing to you or trying to sell you those self-defense classes use will help you make a more informed choice about what is the right place for you to train in to get the outcomes that you need to get.
Yeah.
That made sense.
Yes. So much good stuff there, man. And I think just from the outset, I mean, we're going to be talking about this subject from a couple of different angles. You know, both of us have run commercial schools, so we have that business point of view. Both of us also have had stints where our main source of income is coming from somewhere else, and you can be a little bit more choosy about how you choose to do your business with your martial arts school. And also both of us have been students that have been targeted by advertising to go to a certain location and to learn a certain thing because of how it's been presented. And now both of us are parents, right? So we're also looking at how kids' martial arts potentially is marketed, or how vulnerable communities are targeted with marketing. So if you're listening to this show and you're a school owner, there's going to be something for you. If you're someone who is just teaching recreationally, there's going to be something for you there. If you're just a parent or a student or a prospective student or someone who's interested in I guess getting a peek behind the curtain about why certain things work and why certain things are used, there should be something there for you as well. So please do keep an open mind. At no stage, actually, no, I won't say that. There will be some stages where I outright will tell you that you're doing the wrong thing. But I will give you the benefit of the doubt that most people that are doing the wrong thing are doing it out of ignorance, not out of malice. But look, as a starting point, I mean, I started teaching commercially, I guess. I mean, I've been teaching at a PCYC. I've been teaching martial arts since I was a teenager. But I started teaching commercially when I was like 21 years old. I started Progressive Defense, which was my brand of reality-based self-defense, mostly teaching Senshido concepts. And I started that when I was 21, and I knew nothing about business, right? I had no business education at all. All I knew is that if I had a business, I could train, and then I could go to seminars, and then I could claim it on my tax, and somehow it made training free. Right? That was about the extent of my business education. Yep. So I started this business, and I started like doing my first flyer, right? Because the first thing anyone knows about marketing is that the best way to market is letterbox drops, right? That's everybody loves letterbox drops. That's the best way to market anything, clearly. And I built this flyer, which had like a badass looking dude on it, and there was like blood, and there was knuckles, and there was like all the stuff that me as a 21-year-old have gone, yeah, that's what I want. And I remember showing it to another school owner who was much more experienced than me. He's probably in his 40s. He'd been running martial arts schools for like 20 years. And he's like, you're only going to attract people like you, and people like you don't want to pay for training. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, who are you actually trying to help? Are you trying to help other bouncers and hardcore dudes that want to fight? I'm like, yeah, that's those are my people. and he's like, yeah, but who needs the training? Is it aggressive people, or is it people that are scared? And someone who is already scared and timid is not going to respond to that marketing message. And I was like, oh, you're right. And he also said something else that's interesting to me. I'll be interested to get your thoughts on it as well, from your experience having done a lot of A/B testing, a lot of trialing and marketing with your school. He said, if you display an image that shows like someone being kicked in the head, for example, like someone doing a high kick, a nervous or insecure person will identify themselves with the person being kicked, not the person doing the kick. So always use images where there's no one being the victim, because otherwise people will see themselves as the victim. So I thought that was a really interesting insight from a guy who had no psychology training, just had run businesses. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that kind of thing, how you dress up your marketing.
Yeah, totally. And, for me, it actually, what you said resonates with another image that I've seen before, used for like, women's self-defense classes, which is essentially just the face of a woman with like a hand across her mouth, like somebody from behind, which is absolutely just fear-based marketing, right? Like going, you don't want this to be you, come train with us. But let's face it, nobody's going to look at themselves as the person putting the hand around the other person, right?
Yep.
So no, 100%, like you're attracting different people based on the images that you use. What we actually try and do most of the time now with the stuff that we do is actually just show videos or images of like our training. So just pictures of class or videos from class or something like that, where they can get a feel for what's being done, how it's being done. They actually get to see the people who they will meet when they come in. They get to see the facility itself. So it's not necessarily something so far-fetched or fantastical, like, I'm throwing a jumping, spinning 540 heel kick to the whatever. It's very direct and like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And we actually get good results from that.
You touch on something that's really important. I think will probably lead us down the path that we plan to go on with this chat. But we're talking about fear-based marketing. Yeah. And that has been, I mean, if you've been around the martial arts like, at all, there are basically two ways of attracting students that are mainstream. You either show them how awesomely cool they're going to be when they get their black belt, or you show them how helpless a victim they're going to be if they don't. Right? That's basically two ways of looking at it. And I think if any martial artist looks at themselves with any kind of integrity and honesty, they know that neither one of those is perfectly accurate. I mean, people get skills, but also people defend themselves without any training, like every day of the week. But that fear-based marketing has always sat wrong with me. Like, the only people that are going to respond to fear-based marketing are people that are already scared. So we're taking advantage of people that are traumatized, that have possibly been abused, that possibly have life events that have led to them being fearful of conflict. And then we're going to try and exploit that to bring them into a class. And you can say, well, that's because we want to help them. But do you really? I mean, is your marketing saying, I want to help you? Or is your marketing saying, come to me or else this will happen to you?
That's right. That's a really important distinction. And, the thing is also then ties back to, and I kind of don't want to go down that route, but it's worth bringing up that, is what you're teaching actually going to help them?
Yeah.
So, okay, so self-defense versus combatives versus martial arts versus combat sports versus self-protection versus Krav Maga versus, call it whatever you will. What are you actually teaching, and how do you know it's going to help that particular person? And, there's been, you've had, what episode number is this one? 97?
91, I think.
91. Okay, so you had 90 other episodes where this stuff was probably discussed on at least in every episode to some degree.
Yeah.
So let's not go down that route. But it's also important to have that integrity from your end going, is the stuff that I'm selling to that person who I've targeted based on the fear of being attacked or being, being a victim, is it actually going to help them not be a victim?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the answer is not always as clear cut as we'd like it to be. Most of it's not.
Yeah. And even if it is, I mean, I just say I have moral issues, with how we approach things. And again, for complete transparency, there's no blame here. I think it's largely a factor of A, ignorance, and B, practicality. As you and I are both students of Dr. Gav Schneider, and as he likes to say, it's where the RAS is articulated. If someone's in a fearful state, they'll notice the things that trigger that emotion in them. If they're in a state where they're looking for achievement and recognition, then maybe the photos with the trophies and the black belts and the smiling kids and stuff, that's what's going to get to them. And there's a place for it. But yeah, I mean, how you actually do it. You mentioned at the beginning, we're talking about Robert Cialdini's work and Gavin de Becker's work. I knew, I read Gavin de Becker's work, when I say Gavin de Becker's work, I read The Gift of Fear way back in, right around the time I started my first school. And I immediately recognized when he was talking about the tools that predators use to win trust and to con and to manipulate, I immediately recognized those as the same tools I was being given when I was working as a telemarketer. Right. The exact same training. I was like, wow, that's interesting. So predators use the same strategies as salespeople. And then fast forward 20 years later or 15 years later, I'm reading Robert Cialdini's book, Influence, and he continually refers to the art of influence as similar to jiu-jitsu, which is what grabbed my attention because I was like, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. Is he actually a martial artist?
He's not, but I think he trained a little bit. I think he did I don't know, probably did a university course or something, but he kept referring to jiu-jitsu principles. And I thought that was kind of cool. And then the martial arts nerd in me went, the applications of the history of jiu-jitsu, the reason that Kano founded judo or wanted to not call his system jiu-jitsu is because jiu-jitsu had become the system of the thug, where something that was originally designed for battlefield purposes or protection purposes had become something that people use to exploit and to bully and to manipulate and to shake down local merchants. So he wanted to call it something else. And like that's physical jiu-jitsu, but then you look at what we're talking about here with manipulation, influence, persuasion, etc. The same thing applies, right? You can use it to help and to heal, or you can use it to bully and manipulate.
Yeah, 100%. And then, if you go back to, the sheepdog analogy that everybody would be familiar with probably, what we're actually seeing is the sheepdogs and the wolves are actually using the same tactics to get the sheep on their side.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of creepy and can be good and can be bad. And I think it's worth investigating. But let me take a kind of like a detour, because one of the things that have often come up when that kind of discussion came up for me was people asking, should we actually charge money for self-defense training in the first place?
Oh, excellent rabbit hole.
Right? Like if you're giving people the skills to save their lives and to keep them and their family and their community safe, so on and so forth, well, shouldn't you just do it for esoteric reasons, right? For the betterment of humankind and so on and so forth. And different people have different views. For my views, that same as everything, there's probably a little bit of black, a little bit of white with a ton of gray in the middle. But the general answer for me is no. Like, and let me explain a little bit. But if I consider myself a professional, right? I've been training my whole life. I've spent a lot of time and effort and money, skilling up in order to develop the skills that I have so I can pass them on to others. And as such, I think that those skills do have some monetary value. And in addition, I also have a family that I need to provide for, right? So in much the same way, for example, if you go to a good doctor or a good lawyer or a good accountant or a good, any type of professional, there's a very good chance that you would have to pay a premium to train them. Now, how much is that premium? Well, that's up to you, but should it be given for free? Well, if martial arts fell under like public healthcare, then maybe we'd be able to do it for free, but it doesn't. And I think there's always exceptions to the rule. Like if somebody's come up to me, and it's happened before, where people will come up and go, look, I'm in a bad situation, or I need help, or for whatever reason, they can't afford to train. I'm like, hey man, let's not worry about it. Just train. If it helps you, we can sort out all the other stuff later. But I don't think that stuff should be done for free. I really don't. And
yeah,
essentially when you give something for free, people usually think it's worth nothing.
100%. Yeah. You raise some really good points. And like my goal has always been with anything that I'm doing professionally, that has the benefit, has the ability to change someone's life and to really be a blessing to someone, is that I always want to make sure I'm charging enough for it. One, so that people value it. Two, so that the people that can afford it pay it. And three, so that I make enough that I can justify doing it for free for others that maybe are in a special circumstance. So it's no different to a law firm charging whatever premium they normally charge so that they can do a certain number of pro bono cases in a year. And obviously there's reputational advantages as well. But the fact that you charge a profit, or that you make a profit most of the time, does give you then the freedom to be able to give more freely. Without having to worry about if I let this person train for free, then how am I paying my rent this month? Like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the charity has to come from a place of prosperity, and I think that's something that a lot of martial artists get sort of hung up on. But then there's the other side as well, where people really do become kind of selfish and don't really remember why they got into what they're doing in the first place. But I think that's the minority.
Agreed. And there's all the strip mall, Krav Maga, Taekwondo, Aikido, get your black belt in a year, yada, 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 whatever. It's like, pump them in, pump them out, certificate mill stuff. Okay, maybe those are not part of the discussion we should be having, because we know that A, probably not very ethical. B, well, if we're talking about ethics and self-defense training, what they're training for the most part is not self-defense anyway. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Yeah. But at the same time, I had a real issue with the McDojo chain school karate system when I was young and naive and probably a little bit too full of myself, to be honest. Because I was like, no, you need to be training in garages and with t-shirts, and like that's anything beyond that is selling out. You're not even trying to teach real self-defense anymore. But then you realize, if someone is able to teach 50,000 people throughout their life because they've got a business model that scales, like how many more lives are they touching than me training 3 guys in my shed for the next 20 years? feel like.
Absolutely. So and I totally agree. And I think the other value that sometimes, especially when we talk about teaching kids, right?
Yeah.
So realistically, if you're teaching 8-year-olds self-defense, there's very little physical stuff that you can teach them that will be effective.
Yeah.
Right. Like most of the time, the threats they're going to be faced are not ones that physical solutions will work for.
Yeah.
Or physical alternatives will be solutions for, however you want to phrase that. Right. So if you're teaching those kids, to be respectful, and you give them some confidence and some situational awareness and teach them how to set healthy boundaries, and you can do that in a McDojo environment where they're, kicking boards or punching the air, like that's got nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So if you're impacting 50,000 kids in that positive way, hey, kudos, amazing.
You know another thing that's a kind of we're so deviating from what we said we're going to talk about, but it's a fun conversation. So apologies if you've already switched off, but then you can't hear me apologizing. So whatever. One thing that used to really grab me was the 7-year-old black belts, right? That they used to sort of grind my gears as someone who bled and sweat and like died for every grade. I was like, seriously, like you're gonna give a black belt to a child, like into a legit child, not even like a prodigy, but just like a child. Like they didn't make any sense. And then I realized that what I was actually doing was I was applying the value that I placed upon my own black belt to really what is just an inanimate piece of cloth that is a token of training and paying your dues and showing up and hitting whatever criteria that instructor has decided. Yeah. And it's like, and then like I remember I was part of an online conversation, probably on a forum somewhere, but back when forums were a thing, and someone was having a bit of a whinge about McDojo child black belts, and someone who was much smarter than me at the time said, "Are you so insecure that you're concerned that if you, as a 25-year-old black belt or 25-year-old brown belt, stood in front of an 8-year-old black belt, that people would think that the 8-year-old's going to kick your ass?" And it's like, you know what? It's funny, but it's kind of true. Like the whole reason that adults who aren't black belts get upset about kids having black belts is like, someone's going to think that 7-year-old's tougher than me. Like it's so ridiculous when you frame it that way.
100%.
So yeah, but that's a marketing tool, right? I mean, belts are a marketing tool.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, so maybe to get back to what we were meaning, for me, it kind of presented in kind of 3 areas or steps or processes where when we talk about marketing specifically is the first one probably understanding what people think violence looks like, then looking at what people think a self-defense instructor should look like and what their competency in that space might look like as a result of marketing and what their concept of violence looks like. And then looking at it from the business end of, well, how did the marketers actually use that? So that's kind of the way that it framed in my head. Yeah,
well, let's start with that. Like, so let's start unpacking that. So what was the first piece you said?
So essentially, what people
what do people think what violence looks like? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and a large part of that we control, right? I mean, people come to us because they don't know anything about violence and they're worried about it. So they want that, and so how we present that becomes important, right? So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
So, I think even if we unpack that even a little bit more, let's look at most people's understanding of what violence looks like. Let's face it, the people who actually come to training with an idea of, from a place where they've experienced violence or they've seen a lot of violence, they're few and far between, even though they're quite often the people who need the most help. But most of the time it comes from media, right? So practically everything that we watch today has got some form of violence in it, whether choreographed or exaggerated or, whatever other words you want to throw around it. But, every movie that we watch has got some type of violence in it most of the time, video games, so on and so forth. So, there's that expectation that if this is what I'm seeing all the time, this is what it must be like. And I think if we then add that with the popularization of combat sports, and now, UFC is kind of a household name, and, celebrity boxing matches are doing rounds at the moment.
If I ever do a show on YouTube boxes on this podcast, it's over. Just someone pull the plug.
Yeah. But so most of the time, people's expectations of what violence looks like in the real world is not what it really looks like. It comes from these fictitious sources or choreographed sources that portray in a very particular way. And then from that, the other thing that's attached to it is then they associate some value to the black belt, that piece of cloth that you mentioned that's around your waist. That means if that guy's wearing a black belt, or I've seen somebody with a black belt, obviously they understand violence and whatever they say is gospel, because martial arts and self-defense are not a regulated industry and we don't have a set standard and there's nothing like that. So I think to start with, people come to us with a set of expectations that may not necessarily be realistic when they're looking for self-defense training specifically. And then marketing often reflects that, right? So for example, what you said, it might be guys in MMA gloves doing, fighting in a cage or getting an armbar or doing something like that, or somebody in a gi doing a flying spinning kick, going, come and learn self-defense and get fit. But what you're catering for is a different type of violence that doesn't actually support the real notion of self-defense. It's purely catering to what unrealistic expectations the market has. So rather than educate them on what it looks like, you're kind of just playing off that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And again, it's an ethical question, isn't it? Like it's an ethical question about whether you want to educate them or whether you want to capitalize on them. And I'm not completely opposed to the idea of, well, let's meet them where they're at and then guide them along the path towards where they need to be. And there's a place for that. And I think sometimes those of us that sometimes are too self-righteous for our own good and say, no, this is the way things have to be, and this is the only way that works. And this is it's like, great. But again, how many people are you influencing training 3 people in your garage? So you need to have some sort of commercial sensibility to be able to reach more people and to have more of a platform. And at the same time, you need to be able to make sure that you can always tick off your own ethical checklist, that what you're doing is not only good for you, but good for others, good for the community and good for the greater good. And it might be a process. It might be, like I've tried marketing with, realistic, completely fact-driven, and I got nobody. So maybe I need to get some kids breaking some boards but then it's not about, oh, if you're attacked by a tree, do this. It's like, I want to prove that you can do something you don't think you can do, and you're building self-empowerment. So it's just being honest about what you're teaching. If I'm teaching kids classes, I'm not teaching, predator prevention and molestation, defenses. Like, not unless it's a very specific scenario, in which case I'm teaching their parents more than I'm teaching the kids.
Oh, 100%.
And it's not a topic that really, I think, should be broached that frequently, if at all, and very, very delicately. But what I'm teaching is, I'm going to show you that your body can do things you didn't know it could do, and you can achieve things you didn't know you could achieve, and you can work harder than you didn't know you could work. And that's where the real value of kids martial arts is. And there's no problem with selling that. It's when you make their mum believe that they're going to be a Terminator and destroy all the bullies in the school after they've done 3 weeks of Taekwondo.
100%. And I guess the flip side of that is, how many coaches, trainers, instructors, senseis, shihan, sifus, call them what you will, right? Who have no real experience with violence, advertise that fully believing that that's actually what they're doing.
Yeah.
Turn this kid into a Terminator by getting him to break boards. And again, it might not be done through malice, just purely,
It's ignorance.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, the instructor's never been in a fight, so what's he got to judge by? Right?
Well, he's sensei back in Korea and, Indonesia, Israel, whatever it might be, had this technique that's lethal and hasn't been proven in 800 years or something. But on the battlefields of whatever, it used to, smite the enemies of, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And look, I've become much more open-minded to less conventional styles over the years, and I guess it's probably just a maturity piece, to be honest, like just sort of recognizing there's a lot of things you don't know, and a lot of things you may not, that don't seem logical because you don't understand them yet. But I mean, I remember having a guy come into a class I was teaching, and he was some obscure kung fu style, which he might have made up himself. I really don't know. I can't recall what he called it. He said, "Oh, if you tried to do this technique, I would just hit you here between like the third and fourth rib." And like he showed me with his knuckle exactly where he was going to hit me, and the angle was important, and he had to like brace himself and use his chi. And he's like, I'm like, "Oh, okay. Like, can we try? Like, can we like show me how that works?" He goes, No, it's deadly. You'll die if I do that. I'm like, "Oh, have you killed someone with it before?" And he's like, "Well, no, because I would never do that to someone unless it was like life and death." And I'm like, "Okay, so I mean, I know a little bit about physiology. I'm not quite understanding how it would be deadly. Did someone else use it to kill somebody? Like, did your sensei?" He's like, No, he's just peaceful man. Okay, did his sensei use this to kill somebody? Well, I don't know. So at what point in human history was this technique deadly? If we have no science to explain why it would be deadly, and no one's ever used it to kill somebody. And he's like, "No, just trust me, bro." Okay, cool, no problem. Okay. I trust you. I trust you. That's fine.
But yeah, so I guess we're kind of deviating a little bit from the actual marketing, but again, it's part of it. So sometimes when on the martial arts side, from the instructor side, somebody goes, "I'm teaching self-defense." Well, it's also a question of whether they really are. And you've had some really, in fact, I think it was one of the first podcasts that you did. It was just one of your own. There was, here are 10 or 12 things to look for in a good defense school. And I've had a similar blog post on my website ages ago. So it's maybe just worth for the listeners to go check those out and just have a look going, here's some of the things you need to look at when you're actually going to walk into the place and see what they do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But then, those sources of efficacy and the expectations that people place on the instructor's experience, even if we look at the pure self-defense stuff, how often have you seen it? Hey man, it's the same on my bio on our website, has trained law enforcement, or was in the military, or has done security, or has done this, or has done that. The special forces, whatever training that people go, "Oh, well, straight away, that means self-defense." And again, there's that element of, well, is this relevant to the type of people you're actually trying to help? But, I think we've been down that rabbit hole. If we get back to what it was we actually wanted to talk about, maybe the whole idea of actually influence and manipulation.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I think that starts with how people first get to meet you. I mean, like if we look at even just looking at our websites, like what sort of images are you using on your website? What sort of tone, what sort of colors, like what you're all of that. If you're marketing well, like if you're actually putting time and energy into your marketing, or you're engaging a marketing consultant, that should be driven by the type of person you're trying to attract. Right. And if you have everything is wolves and skulls and tattoos and blood and gore and threatening music and all that kind of stuff, and fast cut videos of instructors hitting people and people falling down in the streets, and then you're like, "But I'm not getting any mums and kids." Like, I mean, of course you're not. Right? Like you're going to get a bunch of people. And look, there's nothing wrong with appealing to a certain demographic. There's nothing wrong with going, "I want somewhat aggressive 15 to 25-year-old males." In fact, if you're running an MMA school and you want to train fighters, great place to start, right? If you want to do full contact stick fighting and you want some people to beat with sticks, like I'm there for you, right? And I definitely would have been there for you when I was that age, and absolutely, there's nothing wrong with that.
I think the problem for me is that like my mind still wants to be there, my body just
100%. And to me, like, I cringe a little bit now, like, it's too many Punisher skulls on one page. But at the same time, I mean, again, the ethical thing that we keep coming back to is, are you being honest about what you're providing? Okay? Are you being honest about what you're providing? Are you being honest with yourself about who you're trying to attract and what size your business wants to be and all that kind of thing? So coming back to your second point about what instructor should look like, that's interesting, right? Because how you present yourself, what do you wear? How do you interact with people? Are you smiling and friendly, or do you always seem dark and brooding and grimacing? Like, and that's your personality. Like, I'm not going to say change your personality, but maybe sometimes you should change your personality. So what's your take on that?
So Okay, so for me, it's actually interesting, I think, because I've been both in education my whole life. And then I actually have a background in music. So, I've been playing music since I was really young. I started music at university. I used to gig a lot and do a lot of session work and stuff like that. So to me, the two always connected. That the second I start teaching, it's almost like I step on stage and I've got a separate persona or personality, or it's a performance. But and for the most part, I can do it. And we all have days where you just can't switch on. But I think that also makes it a little bit easier because I can kind of leave stuff behind, put on my professional face, so to speak, and run the class in a way that I think would be beneficial. And I'll try and be friendly and smiley and help people and make them feel comfortable and give them what they need and leave my baggage outside of that. So to a great extent, I do think it's important to kind of leave your personality aside and recognize that if you're doing this as a business, then you need to have a professional attitude to what you're doing.
Yeah.
And even if you're just talking about helping people, nobody's going to want to come talk to you and train with you if you're constantly miserable and just like beating people up.
Yeah, and you know what? If I go to a bakery and I order a cupcake, I'm not going to say it's okay if you give me a shitty tasting cupcake today because I can tell you're in a bad mood. Right, the product shouldn't change no matter what mood you're in, and it's difficult when it's a human service, right? It's yeah. But I mean, I've told this story on the podcast before, and I don't recall whether it was in the main interview or during bonus content. So I'll just quickly recap. When I had Richard Norton on the show, I think I mentioned this to him. But the first time I met Richard Norton, so Richard, legendary Australian martial artist, more black belts than anyone should ever have. Hollywood stuntman, Hollywood actor, been there, done that, bodyguard to the stars before he became an actor. Like, brilliant guy. Go back and check the interview with Richard Norton if you want to know more.
It's really good.
But I met Richard at a seminar. I think he was 59 at the time, right? So he's still going strong now, 15 years later, or however many years it's been later. Apologies, Richard, if you're listening. I just made you older than you are. He arrived for this seminar and he'd literally flown in from LA to Brisbane before the seminar. His flight had been delayed. He was late. He was like an hour and a half late to the seminar because his flight got delayed. He arrived in a taxi an hour and a half late. Everyone's standing around outside waiting for the workshop to begin. And he looked like a guy who just got off a 17-hour flight, right? Because he'd probably been up for 24 hours. He'd flown out of LA. He's been delayed. He's now dealing with this stuff. He's had a cab ride to try and collect himself to get back to then try and teach a 3-hour workshop on self-defense. So I saw this guy get out of the cab looking like a 59-year-old guy who'd just been through hell. And my expectations of the seminar immediately went down. I was like, I'm not going to get the best Richard Norton experience. And he was like really tired and kind of like, I won't say stumbling, but he was like kind of slow and just fatigued as he's walking through, saying hello to everyone, being super polite and friendly and smiling and giving people a handshake and stuff. I thought, oh, he's a gentleman, right? But yeah, I'm not going to get that much tonight. And then he went into the changing room to change into his gi. And I swear it was like watching Superman change out of his business clothes into a Superman outfit. He came out and he was like exuding an energy. He was gliding across the room. He was sharp. He was mentally switched on. He looked like he'd just had an 8-hour nap in the time it took him to put his gi on. And that seminar was so full of energy and it was so like crisp. And it was just like, it was pre-recorded and he just like hit play and the seminar came out. And it was incredible, man. And it was, to me, it was a really defining moment for me as an instructor to look at that and go, that's a pro. Like, that's what a pro looks like. And very much to your point, I mean, that's what students deserve, right?
100%. Yeah. And not only that, again, if we tie that back to marketing, right? So a lot of times look at, come down, you're going to have fun, you're going to meet new people, and, you're going to step out of the normal gym environment, learn cool skills, and all that kind of stuff, which is really positive, and it's true. Then you go in there and you got this like grouchy bastard who's just standing there like looking mean and shouting at you and hitting people. Like, there's a bit of inconsistency between what I was told I was going to get and what I'm getting. That doesn't lead to good retention, right?
Could I pull on that thread just for a second?
Of course.
What's your take on using stock photos of other dojos and other students on your website or on your marketing materials, so that maybe creating an illusion of a more professional environment than what they're going to experience when they walk in?
Wow, that's a really loaded question.
I know.
So, yeah, so let me give you a bit of background to give you an understanding of how my thinking of that might have changed over time. So when we opened Combat Arts Institute of Australia, Kaya, with myself and Sensei Noah Greenstone, we actually opened, it was like 9 years ago, just at the start of June, right? So we've been around for a little while. And when we first opened, we had literally, it was a car park that has been converted into a basement. We had 30 mats that were like old, tattered, like blue kind of 20 mil, mats put together, 3 bags on the wall, and a bunch of like old, smelly focus pads. And that was about it.
Nice.
So we used a lot of stock photos in our market because like our gym really wasn't that great. And what we were trying to like advertise was that our training was really, really good. And that was the focus of what we were emphasizing, because let's face it, our equipment wasn't great. Now, we're also in a position where both Noah and I had other jobs at the time. So as the school started making more money, instead of us just taking a profit or taking all of it out, we go, okay, well, we've got $1,000 this month. Let's buy some more mats. Let's buy new bags or new pieces of equipment, la, 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 la. So over time, that's changed. Where, we've gone from this like small gym to now it's, we've got like pretty much a 400 square meter facility with a lot of like, ring and a gym and new mats, and it looks really nice. So we use a lot of that now. But the main thing here, I think, is honesty, is that if you're using stock photos, it's cool if all you're saying is the quality of your training is good. I wouldn't put a stock photo or a photo of another gym showing what our gym looks like. And let me give you the flip example of that. We had an instructor who trained with us for a few years, who then left to open his own school. And he actually ended up using photos from our school where he had whited out the logo of like all the student uniforms.
Oh no.
Go on instead.
Wow.
That to me is probably not so ethical.
That's probably crossing the line a little bit.
Yeah, that discussion was not particularly fun, but so
for the record, if you're going to use a photo, make sure you've bought the rights to it or you own the rights to it, and certainly don't use someone else's photos and then just delete their logos out of them. That's at that point, I'm not going to even allow you to plead ignorance.
100%. But yeah, so in terms of my thoughts on that, I've got no issues with using stock photos. I don't like them, but at the same time, I also understand that if you're just starting out of school, you may not have another option.
Yeah.
It might just be cheaper than decking out like a 10,000 square foot facility.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I've used a lot of stock photos in a lot of different marketing. It's not something that I have a real issue with. My encouragement would be to instructors out there that are like trying to get started is one, it doesn't cost a lot of money to take good quality photos now. Like, I mean, if you've got an iPhone, you can take photos that are better than what we could take with a DSLR camera. Well, maybe not DSLR, but with a decent quality digital camera 5-10 years ago.
Pretty much all of our marketing images at the moment for Kai are taken like on Noah's iPhone.
Yeah, exactly. So if you
snap a picture and like we'll use it.
Exactly. So if you learn how to frame a photo correctly, then you've pretty much got the gear to do it. And my encouragement would be that I think if you're trying to attract long-term students, which is where the money is in martial arts, right? You want people that are going to keep paying year in, year out, not people that are going to come and do a 3-week trial and then never see them again. People respond well to authenticity. And I think if people feel like they're being misled because they're presented this like amazing professional experience and they get there and it is just blue mats and a couple of bags against a squash court wall or something. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but at least like if we're going to use some stock photos, and at least show these are some photos from live classes, so people get an idea of this is what the classes look like. It might not be the dominating image on your website because you might not want that image to define you, but at the same time, like on your social media, use real photos of real people and real classes, obviously with permission, because that's what's going to make me connect with you as an instructor. And for me, with a little, even with a little bit of experience, like when I'm looking at places that I might want to go and check out and train, I want to see, okay, who else is there? What sort of people are they? What's the general vibe like? Because that's going to mean more to me than whether you paid for an iStock subscription or not.
100%. Totally, man.
Yeah.
Cool, man. And then, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, let's have a quick chat about some of the DeBecker and Cialdini stuff you were talking
Cool.
about.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking too. Sweet. So, I've got this little chart that I put in front of me because Joe knows, and listeners may not know, that I'm a pedantic OCD planner, and I have to have stuff in front of me. Otherwise, I can't.
Yeah, Ron and I are like complete opposites when it comes to preparation for stuff. It's a running gag in the company now. Like Ron's the kind of guy who'll do 3 days of planning for a half-hour webinar. Whereas I'm happy to run 3 days of training on just like a napkin and go, this is where you want me to get to. Okay, I'll do my best. The difference is Ron gets really precise results, and I tend to go really hard in the general direction of where we're going. So yeah, we complement each other.
100%. Cool. So, I've got this little table in front of me where I kind of put some of the Becker's principles right next to the corresponding principle that Cialdini talks about.
Yeah, nice.
And maybe we can run through those and talk about them a little bit, because I think they're actually interesting. So
absolutely. Yeah, you sent me through this table ahead of time, and it is actually really interesting, because even though I knew those similarities, I didn't realize how closely they're mapped, and it's right. Quite fascinating, right? So I mean, the first one you've got there is forced teaming, which is a DeBecker principle of manipulation, basically. And then Cialdini's principle of unity, which is a principle of influence. And by the way, influence and manipulation are basically the exact same thing. The only thing it changes is what your desired outcome is. So if you're trying to influence someone to take control of their health and improve their quality of life, that's a positive thing. If you're manipulating someone into giving you their life savings, you might be using the same strategies, but it's probably not a good thing. So
exactly right. Yeah. So I think it's the outcome and the ethics that really determine whether it's influence or manipulation. Yeah, cool. So when we talk about forced teaming, I guess what we often see is that predators will try and create that instant connection very, very quickly, right? They might use stuff like we or you and I are different to that other group, or try and straight away create that kind of team spirit or team bond. And Cialdini talks about it as well. He refers to it as unity. And that's really that idea that we do more for our own, right?
Yeah, so we do more for people that are like us, yeah? People that 100%. We associate with, yeah.
Yeah, people that are like us, people we associate with, people who are part of our unit, part of our tribe, part of, our social group, what have you. And this is something that we see quite often predators use, but you also see marketers talk about that quite regularly when they try and build connection with people. So if they're, trying to sell you something, straight away they'll start talking about we.
Yeah.
I are going to achieve this, or we will do this, or hold on a second, we're not doing anything. Done that stuff already. I haven't even started. So straight away you can see there's that almost forced connection, or trying to speed up the nature of the relationship.
Yeah, it's like the membership salesperson at the gym, right? And I mean, if you're running a commercial fitness studio, martial arts studio, whatever, like you probably have a membership person. It might be you, like you might be multi-hatting, but part of your role is going to be having those conversations with the walk-in, with the trial, trying to get them to sign up, trying to get them on a direct debit. And it's very, very common to hear that language, like how would we like to get started? Yeah, when will you be joining us for your next session? Like it's this assumption, us, we. Yeah. You're already part of it. Let me give you the shirt right now. So you're already part of the group. You're one of us. Like this, it's like there's so much power psychologically in doing that. And again, like I keep restating, but it's not necessarily an evil thing. It's not necessarily an unethical thing, as long as you're still prepared to hear no. Okay, and that's right. And I think that's where we draw the line, right?
Okay, beautiful. So I'm actually going to jump from the first one on the list to the last one that I have on the list, because nice. It's exactly that, right? So, DeBecker talks about his seventh one, I think, is discounting the word no. I don't know that Cialdini necessarily had a corresponding one to that, but, one of the first things you learn in most sales courses is how do you overcome objections, which is I offer you a good or service, you say no. How do I discount that no and get around it to get a yes? Right? And we see that all the time. All right. So you will walk in and you might ask something about classes. And most of the time, the first question would be a price question. What do you do? How much does it cost?
Yep.
Based on that, most of the time people will make some decision. And if that decision is no, then quite often there will be some form of attempt to overcome that objection. Mm-hmm. Well, but have you considered yada, yada, yada? So let me give you an example. And this is something maybe more relating to fitness training than self-defense training, but I see it in the industry quite a lot where people go, yeah, look, that gym membership is a little bit expensive for me. I don't know if I can afford, whatever, 30 or 40 or 50 or 70 or $100 a week. And then the salesman will go, okay, fair enough. Let me ask you a question then. How much money do you spend on eating out a week? Well, I go out eat a couple of times a week. So maybe like 40 or 50 or 60 bucks. Okay. Do you like to drink on the weekends? Yeah, I like to have a couple of beers. Okay, cool. So just based on what you've told me now, you probably spend about $150 a week on like stuff that'll take you away from your goals. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So don't you think it's better to not spend that money or spend, half of that money on a gym membership that will bring you towards your goals? Mm. It's a really good argument.
Yeah. And in fact, what you've actually just outlined there is consistency, right? The other Cialdini principle of consistency, where people then feel like, well, I've already said I want to take charge of my health. I mean, that's what I started this conversation with. And I've gone to the effort of parking at the gym, walking into the gym. I'm clearly trying to improve my health. So now if I say, no, I'm actually not prepared to stop spending money on booze, spend money on a gym instead. Now I'm actually a massive hypocrite, and people will tend to resist being hypocrites. At least publicly. So.
Absolutely. So, I think it's important to recognize that that's something that salespeople do. But again, we keep coming back. It doesn't mean that necessarily a bad thing. Depends on how you do it, yada, yada, yada. But as long as you're aware that you're being manipulated or influenced, that's the first starting point. That at least it gives you a base to work from in terms of going, do I trust this person? Do I not trust this person? And how far are they going to push that attempt to discount my no?
Yeah. And this is again, I think probably my caveat for that is, if you feel like you're overcoming an objection that is not a real objection because it's based on maybe a fear, or maybe it's based upon just them being a little bit insecure, and that if they get into this, they're actually going to be fine and they're going to really benefit from it. That's one thing. If you're trying to bully someone into giving you money they don't have, and they know they can't be fiscally responsible by paying for your membership, and you bully them into signing up for a direct debit that's now going to cause them extra stress, then you're a bad guy. Like you've actually done something unethical at that point. And I've actually had this conversation with gym owners in the past where they said, well, it's not my fault. They signed up for it. I didn't force the pen into their hands. Like, yeah, but you emotionally badgered them and bullied them to a point where they felt like they had to. So regardless, and you knew that they were weak, or else you wouldn't have continued on with that path because you knew it was working. So, and then you're going to go and stand in front of a class and teach people about how you need to be a warrior and a peaceful warrior in the garden. Like, I mean, no, like you just literally beat an old lady to death to take her direct debit off her, and then you're going to try and teach me about ethics? Come on, man.
100%.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, the next one I've got on my list here is charm and niceness, which is the Becker's one, and that corresponds to Cialdini's principle of liking, which is essentially the idea that, we do more for people that we like. But one of the things that De Becker talks about, and I think it's really important, is that charm is not a character trait, and niceness is not necessarily a character trait. It's something that people put on.
It's a skill. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's, obviously a salesperson, somebody who's trying to get you into classes to get your direct debit details, is going to try and be nice to you.
Yeah. And if you're not a likable person, you can become more likable. Like, if that's what's holding you back in business, there are ways around it. Like, don't just go, I'm just not a people person. Well, maybe, but there are ways of faking it convincingly.
Totally. But I think consistency there is important. That, and we kind of talked about before, maybe putting on that professional face. For example, for me, like when I teach, I have to kind of sometimes switch on, going, now it's performance mode for Ron, and that's the persona that I use. Regardless of maybe if I'm having a shit day or, I'm having a hard time or whatever it is, you just have to switch it on sometimes. Not necessarily a bad thing. Same thing if I'm sitting at the front desk, somebody walks in to make an inquiry, of course I'm going to be nice. But what I think is from the consumer end, and that's something that's, I mentioned that blog about finding the right school for you, and you mentioned in that podcast about finding the right self-defense school for you as well. is that go and check out to make sure that it's actually consistent. Speak to the person and see if they're really nice. Then say, is it all right if I sit down and just watch the class for 10 minutes? See how they interact with other people.
The people that have already signed the contract.
Pardon?
People that have already signed the contract.
Exactly right. Like, this person has my money. Are they still going to be nice?
Yeah. If I can add in there, just advice for martial arts instructors. So I know a lot of martial arts instructors that are not people. Like they're not naturally gifted for social interaction. In fact, a lot of us get into martial arts because we're not. But like a solo sports attract a certain type of people, right? So, but my advice to you there, I've always been kind of a people person. So it's not from my own personal point of view, but from other coaches and business owners that I've worked with over the years or learned from over the years that have made it work, is if you're authentically you, then usually there's something likable about you. I mean, no one really gets into martial arts to get rich, right? So there must be a reason that you do what you do that is greater than paying the bills. So if people can see that you actually care about them, or you care about their development, or you care about the art, then that becomes likable. There's like my most recent judo coach, and shout out to Ivo Dos Santos if you happen to be listening. Ivo would fully agree with me that he is a grumpy bastard a lot of the time, right? He's a guy that wears his heart on his sleeve, or maybe on his boot. But Ivo is a great human being who legitimately cares about his students and about his athletes and about the kids in his kids' class. And he is a wonderful, warm-hearted human being, but his exterior is he's a grumpy bastard a lot of the time. Thankfully, his wife is not, and she handles a lot of the customer interaction. But I mean, you can be put off by Ivo, but as you get to know the guy and you start to see him, like, okay, he's actually a warm-hearted dude. He just he's just found a way to be authentically him in a way that you do get to like him, but you actually like him more than you like the salesperson who was artificially likable. Yeah. So if you're not a people person, just be a little bit more open with people and let them see maybe the bits that you're guarding that actually might make you more likable.
Yeah, 100%. And, sometimes I also find just a little bit of honesty goes a long way with that.
Oh, yeah.
If you are having a bad day and it's hard for you to put on that professional persona, and you speak to somebody who come in going like, sorry if I'm a little bit distracted, just had a really rough morning. I'm listening. How can I help? And straight away, like, you're being honest, and that's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So let's talk about loan sharking and reciprocity, because that's a really interesting one. It's something that we talk about from a business point of view on a regular basis, but no one likes to think they're being the bad guy when they try to do someone a favor. So let's break that down a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, cool. So when we talk about either loan sharking or reciprocity, it's really the idea that when we give someone something, they feel obliged to give something back, right? And predators use that in, let me buy you a drink, right? Could be as simple as something like that. Could be a compliment, could be giving you something physical, service, compliment, whatever it might be. And, quite often we see, come in and I'll give you the first class for free. I'll give you a t-shirt. I'll give you this. I'll give you that. I'll give you a half-hour PT, just one-on-one, so you feel more familiar with, and that could be genuine in an attempt to just help. But a lot of the time it's going, okay, well, now I've given you something. You feel obliged to give something back. By the way, here's my direct debit form. Quite often they follow closely together, right? So again, there's nothing wrong with giving stuff away for free or, giving somebody added value. But there's got to be a reason behind that that's authentic, as opposed to just getting bank details.
Yeah, it's got to be used as something because you want to be generous, not because you know that if you give them this for free, they're likely to sign up or they're likely to go purchase something else, right? And this, again, ethically, nothing terribly wrong with it. It's a matter of how far you're willing to take it and whether you know you're exploiting someone. If I know I've got a student that's in financial difficulties, I'll make it exceptionally clear that if I do something for free for them, there's no expectation they're going to pay me back. There's no expectation they're going to do anything else other than just, this is on the house because I know you're doing it tough. And I want to make sure that I want to make sure that when you are back on your feet, you're still training. So you don't have to overcome that extra social stigma of I stopped training and now I've got to go crawling back for mercy and get back in place. Like I'd rather someone train for free than stop training, because that momentum becomes really important with retaining that student, but also for their own development, their own mental health, their own well-being. And it's incredible. Like I watched, there's a local BJJ academy, which I have trained at previously, and I still I still follow them and love what they do. Australian elite team for the Aussies out there. They've got the most amazing gym culture of any gym I've ever been part of. Like it's legitimately incredible. Anyone in the gym needs help. Like people will just anonymously drop money in envelopes behind the desk. Like during COVID, guys lost their jobs, and the gym basically paid for families to get groceries. Like it was just incredible. The gym, as you know, here in Melbourne, like gyms were closed for months and months and months last year. And nearly everybody insisted on their direct debits continuing to go through, but Ninos basically said no, I won't accept them. He forcibly stopped the direct debit. So guys started bringing cash and leaving it under the door, because they were so committed to supporting the gym and the team and the culture of the gym. And when things were resumed, that money then got put into a pool and given to charities. Right? Everything about that place is so incredibly ethical, and it warms your heart just to be near them. But you know what? They're the most successful competition, one of the top 2 most successful competition teams in the country. They're a massively successful franchise. There's a lot of AET gyms. So just because you're ethical doesn't mean you won't be commercially successful. And I think that's super important. But that's an example of using these principles the right way. And also being aware of their power, I guess. Just because you're doing a favor for someone doesn't mean that that you have to expect something back, or that you probably should make it clear you don't expect something back.
100%. Yeah.
Awesome. Actually, another one I would like to pull up on. We are coming up on time, but we're going to probably go over time anyway. One of my dirty, dark secrets that I don't know if I've ever disclosed publicly on the air. So I'm glad this is buried at the end of the episode, because like I might lose listeners. So I needed to be at the part of the episode where a lot of people stop listening. I used to be a door-to-door karate salesman for GKR Karate.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, if you need to leave the interview, that's fine. So for those of you that haven't had the pleasure of meeting GKR Karate, which at the time was still called Gokan-Ryu Karate, but it was GKR. GKR was I won't try and give a history lesson, but basically it was started by a guy in Australia. I believe he was a second dan at the time in a different system. From what I heard, got on a plane, came back a fifth dan, started the school. But I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, so please don't sue me. But became a very successful martial arts franchise. And their model was basically recruiting salespeople to go door knock and sell karate. And if you became a salesperson, you got put on a black belt fast track, which basically meant you did, and it was hard training. Like I trained every day in my lunch break free. Like I wasn't paid. Right? I had to do a 2-hour karate class every day to try and fast track me to black belt. And the idea was that within 3 to 6 months, especially if you had any other martial arts training, then you could then be a probationary black belt, where you got to wear a black belt, but you weren't really a black belt. And then you could start a club, and then you could sell the memberships to your club. And it just grew and grew and grew to the point where there was like thousands of these GKR schools around Australia, UK, and US. But they were the first martial arts business that I can think of that really nailed the whole sales process. So we would canvass neighborhoods. We would knock on doors. We knew what time of day to get there, when the kids were going to answer the door and be super excited about it. Like we mastered the art of putting the folder in front of the parent and reading upside down all the benefits the kids were going to get, and scheduling the interviews and all that kind of stuff. Now it went over terribly with the martial arts community, but people made money. And there's a lot of other stuff martial arts wise I won't go into. I didn't stay with them for very long. But one of the things that was a strategy we used on a regular basis, and this is why I bring it up. We're talking about social proof. One of the things that we used to say is, oh, we've already got 3 of the kids from your street that have just signed up.
Yeah.
Right. So now it's like, well, if my son or my daughter finds out that the kids he plays with in the street are doing karate and I said no, or I've got to have a conversation with my neighbors about why I didn't want to do the karate thing that everyone else loved.
Yeah, that's right.
The social proof or this fear of not conforming. I mean, it ties back into unity as well, I guess. It's unreal, man. It's such a powerful weapon. And most of the time when we said that, we hadn't actually signed up the other kids in the street. Like we told them the same thing. So.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess that's almost, forced teaming, but maybe not with you, but with another group.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're just like all my other customers.
Which is also typecasting, right? Which is the Becker principles. They're, funny. I remember a guy that I used to know who used to be incredibly good at meeting girls that way. Mm-hmm. He would just insult them. And for them to try and prove that they weren't whatever, a snob or a bitch or this or that. And inevitably they would end up talking to him. And like for me, it was horrible to watch. Like it really made me sick. In fact, suffice to say, I didn't stay with mates with that guy for very long because we had a long chat about it and a bit of a disagreement. Pretty much haven't spoken to him since. It was a good, 20 years ago. But we see the same thing happens, right? Like when we try and sell something to somebody, we might typecast to try and make them feel like they're part of a particular group, either in a positive way or a negative way, right? So might say something like, there's all these people who are, they keep saying that they want to do something about protecting themselves and their families, but they're not really honest. But you don't look like that kind of person to me, right? Yeah, of course. Now I'm serious about it, and next thing you know, you signed up.
You just brought up a really bad memory I had of watching a gym salesperson do the same thing. So he actually did it in a really negative way, and it worked, which made it even worse. He was sitting there with someone going, you can sign up for the 6-month option, and he was talking to a guy that was really out of shape, right? And he said, you sign up for the 6-month option. You can save some money if you go for the 12-month option, but I mean, you're probably not really that committed to this at this point. So I mean, if you just want to go for the 6-month, that's fine. I mean, you don't seem like someone who's going to be here in 12 months. If you if you don't mind me saying, you probably, it's like,
oh wow,
oh, it's like, man, what a piece of shit. like I want to go over and just slap the guy. But the guy signed up for 12 months. And I was just working out away from just beside the table where they're talking. I'm like, oh man, that sucks that worked.
100%. So, so it's something that can be used, and, it can be used either to frame something positively, or it can be like a fear-based thing or a negative thing. But again, as long as you recognize that it's being used on you and you're happy to be used in that way, great. If not, at least be aware.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some positive applications for social proof. So, I mean, like the whole reason that Amazon became such a powerful business was that they were one of the first companies to implement customer reviews on their website, so that you could actually go see whether someone else that was like you, ostensibly, had enjoyed that product or had got value out of it, or had enjoyed the book. I mean, Amazon was all books at the time. So that was the first time you could actually see real proof from real people, not just editors, not just paid reviewers, but actual other customers, as to whether they enjoyed that product. And that was super useful. And I think we apply the same things with our website and our social media, right? We want to see, I want to go on a gym social media and see how the people are interacting with each other. And are people commenting on the photos? Are people doing all those things that make me go, oh, people really enjoy training there? So I mean, that's a positive use of social proof.
100%. And I think it's also easy to tell if you're a little bit switched on, whether that is something that was orchestrated by the gym or not, by the type of comments that you see. Like, it's very obvious when people are posting because they've been asked to post. Yeah. Because they've been asked to comment. There's a very specific tone that you see with those things where it's almost scripted and it's almost too complimentary and a little bit too excited.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's. I was told I was going to get a discount if I leave 40 comments this month. Right. So this is part of my kids' grading requirement, is that mum has to comment at least 25 times a month, or else to progress me to the next stripe. It's. I mean, I might have just given someone a bad idea then. Don't do that. But if you do, give me a clip. But yeah.
Sorry, so my brain just did a left turn there, but it was my eye just caught one of the other things we were talking about, which was kind of related to that in a sense, which was the too many details that the Becker talks about. Right? when somebody is dishonest or feels like they're going to get caught lying, they tend to give too many details, almost in an attempt to convince them, to make themselves sound credible.
Like I think there's a martial arts equivalent called too many black belts.
Well, there you go.
There's a guy who's got 14 10th dans and he's only 40. I mean, it's like, right. You look at those kinds of guys, you're like, oh, I know, I also fought in the UFC and I did a kumite and I have a degree in this and I've got a PhD and I've also, it's like
also the Marines and
I served in 3 different countries, like armies, and like at some point it becomes. But that said, I mean, people that are unwitting or don't know any better will respond positively usually to walking in and seeing a wall full of trophies or pictures of you with Chuck Norris that you took at a seminar or that you photoshopped, right?
Yeah. So, it could even be as simple as, and legitimately, I've seen somebody who did that in a Silat school. They traveled through Indonesia and randomly stopped at the side of the road, found some old farmer somewhere, like a selfie with him, and then framed it and posted it in their gym saying like the great grandmaster from such and such.
Oh, wow.
Fifth Dan.
Well, that's like, I mean, I'm not even mad about that. I'm kind of impressed.
Right. Well, innovation, but the thing is, and this is something that has been, I must admit, locally in the kind of Krav Maga community here. I think I've actually pissed off a few people with this a few years ago, where I was commenting without naming any names or pointing any fingers about the fact exactly that, like when you walk into a gym and you see 10 million trophies and certificates on the wall, it does not mean anything about the quality of the teaching or the quality of the instructor. Nothing, zero, zip. If it's all authentic, it just means that the person might be an accomplished martial artist, which is fantastic. Doesn't mean he can teach you what you need. Doesn't mean that he's a good teacher. He or she.
Yep.
So, don't get overwhelmed by all those details and those certificates and those belts and the trophies and the pictures of celebrities and whatnot. Like, actually go in there, have a chat with the person, have a look at what the class is like, then ask yourself, is this person teaching in a way that would resonate with me and would actually help me progress? Like, do I like the way this person imparts information and runs a class and interacts with people around them, as opposed to just looking at the laundry list of qualifications that they have? Because let's face it, we all do it. Everybody's, at the end of the day, the flip side is nobody would come and train with you if you're a nobody. If you go, well, I've been training for 6 months, come train with me. You're not running a good model either. So if you've worked hard for what you've earned and you've earned it legitimately, by all means, that's fine. But from the consumer side, there's got to be a correlation between that and actual ability to impart knowledge and educate. And there isn't always.
I think that where I sit on that ethically is that it's fine to use that stuff to start the conversation. But once the conversation starts, the conversation has to be about them, not about you. Like if you spend that sales meeting telling them all the things that you've achieved, unless you've identified that this is a person who wants to follow the same path as you and they're going to get value from seeing what's possible. I mean, like if you're running an MMA school with competitive fighters and you got a kid who wants to be a fighter and you happen to be a professional fighter and traveled all over the world and did this and this, and you want to tell those stories as a way of lighting a fire under that kid, I mean, yeah, by all means, but it should come back to being about them. It's about what they want to achieve with their life, what they want to do with this. And that's just good business. All right. It's always about your customer. It's not about you.
Totally. And it's funny because there's 2 approaches that I've seen in martial arts with the sales approach to that. And there was one mentor that I had a while ago, phenomenal salesperson, like legitimately, like absolute gun. And his approach was actually quite the opposite. He would provide too many details nonstop. He would not let the other person get a word in. Like he would just like overwhelm them with stuff to the point where they would like almost just, sign up to shut him up. He would get results. And much in like what you're saying, my approach has always been the opposite, is that, I'll tell you a little bit about what I do and how it can help, but then let's hear about what it is that you want to achieve, what your goals are. And let's see if we can work together to achieve those goals in a time frame that would be reasonable, within a cost that would be reasonable, so on and so forth. But it's about the student, it's about the journey. So, if the entire conversation is about you self-aggrandizing and talking about like your, million different black belt, yada, 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 and throwing all those details in, if you're the person on the other side of the conversation, there's a good chance they're not actually interested in you so much, in your growth, as much as they are in your bank account.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. And look, I would encourage you, if you're a consumer on the other side who's listening to this episode and you're starting to recognize that kind of stuff happening, a good question to ask them is, so how many people have you trained that have been able to achieve what you've achieved? Like, or like maybe what can you do for me, and how many people have you done that for? And can I talk to some of them? I mean, like, if I'm a black belt and I'm running a successful school, and I say that I can make you more confident, and you can dominate your career, and you can take over your insecurities and stuff. It's like, oh, awesome. Can I talk to some of your other black belts that have been through that? Because it would be really helpful for me to talk to someone who's been through the same thing. And if they can't produce someone that's happy to speak on their behalf without a whole bunch of coaching first, then chances are that it wasn't a legitimate claim. So and look, I mean, we see that in, like, if we're talking about combatives or sporting martial arts or whatever, we see the same thing. Like, I see people that are really capable, but they're not good coaches. You still might pick something up from them, because even if especially if you're a bit experienced, you might just see the way they move, the way they do something. Maybe they can't articulate it, but you could get value out of it. There's things you can gain, but if you're in the entry level, you really need someone who is first and foremost concerned about you, and secondly, that they're going to be a good coach.
100%. Can I just take a small detour there, because it's I've spoken about both with Sense and Noah and with Gav regularly before, and really there's kind of three pathways that we see with people, and I'm talking about martial arts. So let's think of this as a long-term journey, but self-defense can be the same thing if you're doing this as a lifelong mission to keep yourself safe. Is that one is we see those kind of casual practitioners who come in, they do it for a little bit, they have fun, they might even get good. At some point, life will get in the way, or they'll get broken and they stop. You get people who are fighters, who like to compete, and they really thrive on that, and that's great. And then you see teachers. And I'd like to think that teachers are actually almost the unsung heroes of that, because, and I'm speaking from myself as an experience, right? That I am, I can handle myself, but, all that stuff is good. I spar a lot. I train with really good people. I've trained with world champions, yada, yada, yada. Great. Awesome. But I'm not an amazing fighter. I'm really not. I can handle myself. I do stuff okay. I've never competed at a high level. It's never been something I've been interested in. For me, it's always been about self-defense and keeping my family safe. But I'm a really good teacher. And part of that is also the fact that I'm not a great fighter and I'm not a natural talent, is that I'm like the 10,000 repetition guy. Like, I will have to mess up everything badly a million times to figure out how it works before I can make it work for me. And because of that, quite often I'm able to help students overcome difficulties, because there's a very good chance I've stuffed it up in the same way at some point. So, in much the same way, when you're looking at those details, if you're a competition school, fine. But if you're looking at all those trophies and belts and yada, 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 it doesn't necessarily mean the person knows how to teach. And you should really have a chat to them about how they teach and what is their philosophy behind how they deliver, and watch them deliver to see that it's something that will resonate with you. Because if you find a good teacher, guaranteed you're going to train longer than if you find a good practitioner.
Yeah, 100%. I love what you said there about teachers being the unsung heroes. And it just made me think, like, if you're studying an art that's been around for more than 40 years, then you need to you owe the teachers that came before you, because that art doesn't come along or doesn't continue its propagation because they produced a good fighter. Like, that art is propagated by the teachers. And usually by the people that weren't great fighters, like, cared and loved the art and learned it and understood it and figured out how to pass it on. So, I mean, if you're training in something that's 2,000 years old, there's an awful lot of trainers. There's an awful lot of teachers that you need to thank. But for most of us, I mean, even most systems now that are mainstream, I mean, we're talking 150 years of continual progression and transmission. That's a lot of people that have had to figure out how to teach between you and the source. That give you the opportunity to be able to learn these skills. So. And I mean, that's part of the gift of this show, is I get to bring attention to other trainers and other teachers like yourselves. Ron, let's wrap up the main interview there, because we've covered a lot of ground. We've gone well over time. It's always a pleasure. But if people want to learn more about Kaya, what's the website?
Cool. So just www.kaya, which is caia.com.au, which is short for Combat Arts Institute of Australia. We're located in Perth, Western Australia. We're all the major social media streams. We've got a really cool blog on our website about, self-defense and training. We've got lots of cool short videos on YouTube about self-defense and training as well. Come down and say hi. All
right. Awesome. Highly recommend Ron, if you're in WA, or if you get a chance to do a seminar with him when he's allowed to leave the state and get back in again, then do take advantage. He's a great martial artist, a great coach, and as you know, a great human being. So thank you, my friend. Let's stick around and do some bonus content for our Patreon subscribers. But for those leavers here, thank you, Mr. Ron Amram.
Thanks very much, Joe, and thanks everybody for listening.